to our podcast. This is the Fruity Knitting Podcast, and I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew. This is a podcast about knitting, presented by Andrea, who is a very experienced knitter, as she will show in a moment. And myself, Andrew, I'm a less experienced knitter. I started around episode 1. I'm currently on my third project. It's project number 3. It's my second project. Yep. We're Australians living in Germany. We've been in Germany for about 16 years now.
16 years, wow.
Yeah, we're broadcasting from our Offenbach studio.
House.
Yeah, this is our home in Germany, where we've been living for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
It's a podcast about knitting. We do show a little bit of the German countryside. We've got a little bit of that in this episode. We also have a very special segment today. We had a lot of questions from earlier episodes about fair isle knitting and steeking and some of the modifications which Andrea has made to her fair isle garments. And so we will be looking into that in more detail later in this episode.
Absolutely. So that's going to be the main section of this episode, I think.
Yeah. But the first segment for today is Bring and Brag.
Bring and brag, that's right. And bring and brag is where we show our finished objects. Yeah. And bragging, if you don't know that word, is Australian slang for showing off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got 2 bring and brag objects.
Yeah, well, you can start then because I haven't got any.
And the first one is a hat called Mist, and it is by Kim Hargreaves, and it's from her book Still, which I've shown you in the first and second episode. And this is the hat here in the picture that I've knitted. So it's written for a couple of different combinations of wool, but I've used the Kid Classic. This is my leftovers, Kid Classic, which is lamb's wool and kid mohair blend, and the Kid Silk Haze, which is 70% mohair and 30% silk. So it's really squishy, it's very luxurious and really beautiful. So about the knitting. It's knitted in a fisherman's rib. So a rib typically can be a knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. And it does look like that, but it's not knitted like that. It's actually all knitted in knit stitches. So there's only 2 rows in the pattern, and the first row you knit one and then knit below, knit one below, knit one below, knit one below. And the second row you will be knitting one below in the stitch that you knitted in the previous row, and in the stitch that you knitted below in the previous row, you'll be knitting.
Wow.
So it's just swapping those over. It's actually quite simple. But it does look a little bit like a brioche stitch. And you can also see that in between the plain knit stitches is a bit of a herringbone effect. But what's really good about this stitch is that it's reversible. So it's the same, looks the same on the inside as the outside. So it's a really great stitch to do for a scarf or shawl or hat or anything that doesn't matter what side you see. And because it is, like, each row is pretty well knitted twice, it's very lofty and holds in the warm air a lot more, so it's perfect to keep you warm. So I did a tutorial on this, and I'm going to put that out in about a week's time. So I decided to do about 3 tutorials, at least 3 tutorials from this book. So if anyone decides to buy the book, they've got at least three patterns that if they're a beginner and they'd like a little bit of help on, they can follow along with. So the first one was the darkness coat, which I showed, I think, in episode 2. And then there's this slouchy hat. I should put it on for you. Oh, and it's also knitted with a seam. So an experienced knitter doesn't need to do that. They can just do it in the round, but I wanted to do it exactly the way the pattern's written. So if you're a beginner and you're looking at a pattern for the first, because I want to encourage people or beginners to get onto patterns, following patterns as soon as they can knit and purl. So I just did it exactly like the pattern, so people can follow the pattern and then refer to my video if they need help. So this is what it looks like.
It's slouchy, though.
It's slouchy. So that's the back and that's the front. I've taken some photos of Madeline, my daughter, in it, and she looks much better than I do. Oh. So she'll be decorating the video. So that's my first bring and brag. And my second bring... Yes.
What's next? The
second bring and brag is the windy scarf, which I've showed you, I think, on the last 3 episodes.
Could be.
We're up to episode 4. Yeah. So this is a pattern, and this was done for Andrew, so I'm just going to decorate him with it while I speak about it. So this is the Windy Scarf by Martin Storey, and it is done in the Rowan pure wool worsted. What else can I say I'm just saying this for the people who haven't seen the first or the other 2 episodes. It's a lovely cabled pattern. I've actually washed it and blocked it, and it's so much softer after washing it. This wool is amazing. It's very squishy and soft. So it's a lovely cabled pattern. I think it's a great pattern if you've never done cables before to learn. And I have filmed a tutorial on this. I just have to edit it, or Andrew has to help me edit it and get that up. But so it's great if you've never done cables before, because, and the background is this lovely stripe, and when you're not knitting in the dark cabled colour, you just simply slip those stitches up 2 rows. So it's actually easier than it looks. Yeah, and I think it suits you very well.
And it's a pretty groovy result, I find. I don't know, maybe that's very typical for cables, but the cables sit out really nicely on this background.
Yeah,
so
they really pop out.
Pretty groovy effect.
And the garter stitch background is nice because that it shows up the stocking stitch cables more, and it makes it look squishy as a background. So that's my second bring and brag.
Well done, dolls.
Yes.
Well, I haven't got anything finished, but that's okay. We'll move on to our next episode, next segment. I always get that mixed up. And this is something new.
Yes.
We're in episode 4, so we're allowed to still do new things. We get lots of comments from people all around the world, and that's really fun. We're obviously Australians in Germany, so we have some sort of interest in being somewhere else.
And travelling and what it's like to live in different cultures and different places.
Yeah, we're not big travellers, actually, I wouldn't say. But, we're living somewhere different. We sort of know that. And we're interested and had lots of really interesting comments. Anyway, we decided to do a little segment to give you a bit of an insight into the different people around the world, knitters around the world. So, let's jump into it. This is our first segment of Knitters of the World.
Hello, I am Lene from the Dances with Wool blog. I live here up in the northern Finland, in Lapland, a little bit above the Arctic Circle. I'm very fortunate because I get to wear wool all year round. I was raised by knitting women, and I don't think I never had a choice not to become a knitter myself. We had a very lovely wool shop in my town when I was growing up. My mom was a knitter and she used to go there often. Every time she would make a visit there, she would take me along. And I could choose any yarn I wanted from there. She never asked me if I had finished my previous work, because she knew as well as I did that I hadn't, because my attention span wasn't very long. But that didn't matter, and that didn't prevent me from having more yarn. And it must have been the highlight of my life, my childhood, when I was coming home with Mom with a bag full of wool and possibilities to do whatever I wanted with it. My inspiration it's this north. The climate is so harsh. It's so cold during the winter that you really don't need any other inspiration for wool. When your toes and hands are cold, you crave for wool. I am always interested in learning new techniques, and it amazes me that even though I have been knitting for very many years, I still find something that I didn't know already. At the moment, I am making flowers, wool flowers. I'm one step ahead of Mother Nature at the moment. I am hoping she will catch up with me very soon and will start coloring the surroundings with new colors. I hope you have enjoyed seeing my world, and I'm hoping you a very nice knitting day wherever you are, and as always, wool with you.
So we're back. We hope you enjoyed that. We want to say a really big thank you to Lena, who did this. We threw this at her a couple of days ago only.
Yeah.
Quite sort of completely unexpected from her side and with very little preparation on our side. And we're really thrilled with what she did and what she managed to come up with in a couple of days. And so a huge thank you.
Yes. I thought it was so poetic and just really beautiful. So thank you, Lena. And it really makes me want to visit, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
And the water that looked like it had just been, under the bridge, going down under the bridge, looked like it just turned from snow. Like you certainly would not want to fall in there.
Yeah.
And but so we hope to bring some new knitters every episode from different places around the world, and they can just show you a little bit of where they live and what they're doing. So, that was a great idea of Andrew's. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we do after Bring and Brag under construction, which is what we're working on. But I am so excited to talk to you about Steeking and Fair Isle, so we're going to go straight to the From the Archives section. And we're going to talk basically about what I'm wearing. And what I'm wearing is the Alice Starmore Merry Tudor, that's what it's called. And it's the very first Fair Isle project I ever did. I ever knitted, and it is my first Fair Isle project and my first Steeking project. So I'm going to talk about that with you. And I bought it in the 2013. This is the 2013 Alice Starmore edition of Tudor Roses. And this book is probably the most beautiful, it is definitely the most beautiful knitting book, pattern book I have ever seen in my life. It is certainly the heaviest and the largest and the glossiest pattern book probably ever to be printed. It is filled with, everything about it is just rich in detail, beautiful photography, beautifully illustrated. As you can see here, it's just a gorgeous book, the kind of book that you want to have on your coffee table and sitting there with a lovely vase of flowers or any other ornament you want to show off, so that when you have guests coming around, they can sit and look through this luxurious book. In fact, that's exactly what I did when I first bought it. Every time we had guests, and I can remember a couple of our guests, David and Marco, they came around and I just put them straight on the couch. I was so excited about this book. They've got absolutely no interest in knitting. And I put this book in their lap and said, look at this book.
Awesome.
But one of our friends is interested in publishing, and he immediately remarked about how gorgeous the printing was and the layout and everything. And you can see, so it has lovely illustrations, beautiful photography, and the photography is done by Jade Starmore, who is Alice Starmore's daughter, and she is a knitwear designer in her own right and also a professional photographer. I think she studied at the Glasgow School of Art, which is a very world-renowned art school, I think. Yeah, so this book is part fashion, part photography, part English history, and all celebrating knitting. So you can't have a better book. Yeah. And so the patterns are based, there are 14 patterns in this book, and they're based on women from the Tudor dynasty. And each pattern, I'm just going to show you briefly. Each pattern has a little fictional autobiography. So it's accurate in historical detail, but it's fictional because Jade has made it up. So it's like reading a little segment of private thoughts of the character or the woman that the pattern was based on. So it actually encourages you it's like a little view into her world. And I think that makes you have a good connection with her, and therefore a better connection with the pattern as well. So what else can I tell you? The patterns are all, the shaping and the colours and the motifs that are used in the patterns are all based on the character or the rank of the woman. There's another one, Anne of Cleves, of the woman that the pattern is based on. So, for example, if I go back I've got these big yellow markers in, but if I go right back to the beginning, Elizabeth Woodville, I'll tell you a little bit about her. So Elizabeth was not high-born, but she was an exceptional beauty of her time. And she was so beautiful that King Edward IV insisted on marrying her instead of making her his mistress. And so this design here, you can see, is very much, it has lovely curved lines, the curved lines of the collar, the curved lines of the sleeve. It dips down at the front and the back, and it looks very much like a fitted bodice of a peasant outfit. Not that she was a peasant, but she certainly wasn't high-born. And you can see that it is really like a very simple canvas, that her exceptional beauty, it would have shown off her exceptional beauty. Yeah, so that's an example of how that design represents her character or rank, although she became a queen. And Margaret Beaufort, maybe I know you're knitting wonderfully there, but if you hold it,
like a gentleman.
Yes, like a gentleman.
Okay,
then we can keep it straight, and we mightn't get so much gloss. So Margaret Beaufort is quite an amazing woman. By the age 13, she was married, widowed, and mother of the future King Henry VII. by age 13. Can you believe it? And she spent most of her life carefully navigating subtle but complex political situations. And the design here is very complex and subtle at the same time. You can see these fine lines, maybe you can't, but I'm just going to describe it for you. We have very fine lines in the garment, and there's a lot of geometrical patterning done in just the knit and purl stitch. So that's the very subtle, and that reflects, I suppose, her life. And then, and I think I've marked it, yes, I have, good. Because she wanted to get her son on the throne to be the King of England, she had to negotiate a lot of she was very artful at manipulating family politics. And this garment is reversible, and that kind of shows her artfulness. So you can see it here as a cardigan with the beautiful buttons at the front, or a very elegant jumper with the buttons going down the back. And the way Alice has designed the shaping of the collar, it works for both garments. So I think that's amazing. And here it's done in the slouchy wool, which is the same, if you want to just pull your wool across, this is the same wool that I used in Andrew's St. Bridget. It's a stunning, stunning wool. I talked about that in episode 1.
Yeah, it's really hard to see the colour because it's dark, but it is a very beautiful mix of black and other shades through it. It's based on a seal.
Slouchy is the Gaelic name for a seal. So like a seal's back or fur when it's come out of the sea and it's wet.
Yeah, glistening.
It glistens. It glistens with quite strong colours, although they're subtle, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like green and reds. And anyway, back to this wonderful book. So the garment that I'm wearing is Mary Tudor, as Andrew keeps correcting me. And Mary Tudor was King Henry VIII's beautiful little sister. Can you find it for me? Okay. So here's a picture of it there. So, and you can see just by the way that the illustrations that she has here always match the colours and emblems and motifs that she's used in the design. So it's such a gorgeous book. You can look at it for hours and find even more detail that you won't have seen the first time around. So Mary Tudor, she was married off to the aged King of France when she was young. And she managed, not that she probably had a big say in the matter, but she managed to wangle a promise out of Henry VIII that if she outlived this aged king, which it was pretty obvious she was going to because I don't know how young she was probably still a teenager, then she would be free to choose a marriage of love. And he agreed to that. So when the French king died, she thought, I don't think my brother's going to keep up to his word because I'm too much of a valuable political tool here, and he could easily marry me off to somebody else for greater riches or whatever. And she was in love with King Henry VIII's best friend, who was, I've got written down, Charles Brandon, the Duke of Suffolk. And he was sent over to France to escort her back again. And she thought, this is my only chance to get hooked before my brother marries me off somewhere else. So she very artfully manipulated the new king of France, who was younger and actually had his roving eye very strongly on Mary because she was very beautiful. And she explained to him, there's always this tension between the King of France and the King of England, and because they were the two main powers. And she said, if you allow me, she said to the King of France, if you allow me to marry my lover, then you are really sticking a
spanner in the works.
You're going to put a spanner in the works for my brother, and he will be really annoyed. So this would be a good thing for you. The King of France thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I can't resist that. Taking away a bit of any opportunity to take away a bit of King Henry VIII's power. So he allowed her to be married still while she was on French land to her escort. And so when they came back to England, they were banished from the English court by King Henry VIII because he was furious. But eventually, I think it was his little sister who he did like and his best friend, so he calmed down and they were accepted back in society. So you can tell that actually Mary was probably pretty intelligent and artful, just like her brother, in her manipulations. So this Mary Tudor has got an emblem here. So Alice has used this rose emblem here, or rose pattern, which is based on the Tudor emblem. And she's also got a motive here of the fleur de lis, which is like a lily, to represent her time as Mary's time as Queen of France. And you may or may not see here, but I will put some pictures up of this cardigan so you can see close up. There's a little emblem here of a crown. So just everywhere that this comes, there's a little crown to show that she was Queen of France. So we've got the rose, the lily, and the crown. And of course the colours are very beautiful and regal. Yeah. So this design, as I said, was my very first Fair Isle and Steeking project, and it is perhaps one of the best designs out of Alice Starmore's to start with if you've never done Fair Isle before. The reason being is that it's a cardigan. And, there's a few reasons actually. Also, the chart, you could see goes from, it's a bit hard looking down, but it goes from about here to here. And it is 34 stitches wide and 42 rows. And that's just repeated, so it's only one chart, whereas Henry VIII that I knitted has got multiple charts. That's a lot harder to follow. So that's one reason why it's a good one to start off with. And secondly, because it's a cardigan, and cardigans are much easier to do Fair Isle in. I'll explain the reason why later. But I just want to tell you quickly the modifications I did on this. I'll find the pattern again. I'm doing a lot of talking here, and Andrew's getting a lot of rows knitted.
Yeah, I've almost finished one.
A row?
Yeah.
A row is in 2 socks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here's another picture of it. And it comes in 2 sizes, this garment, in small, medium, and large, extra large. But the small medium was still a little bit too big for me because I look best in more fitted tops. So to figure this out, I didn't want to do a whole lot of different calculations because I was a beginner at Fair Isle at the time. But I thought, okay, so the gauge that you need to use was 28 stitches and 32 rows using a 3.25mm needle. Just a little tip here. If you are going to or trying to do one of Alice Starmore's designs, a lot of knitters find it hard to get her gauge and they have to go down at least 2 needle sizes. Don't worry about that. Go down as many needle sizes as you need to get the gauge. It's so important to get the correct gauge. And you might also think that the fabric is quite dense, but I love it like this. It's like a woven material, which is, I think, beautiful. It's just sometimes if you haven't done it before, it's a new kind of feel that you may not be used to. Anyway, I'm quite a tight knitter, and I used needle size 3mm, and I thought that is going to make my garment overall a little bit smaller. It's going to make it a little bit shorter and a little bit more narrow, and that would be perfect for the fitting completely in the body. But of course, I had to add length to the sleeves, or else my sleeves would be way too short. So I did that. Is there anything else? No, I think that's all. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about steeking. So a steek is a bridge of knitted stitches that is added to the main pattern so that a knitter can knit in a tube or knit a tube material. And that means just knitting continually in the round. And the advantage of doing that in Fair Isle is that you don't have to purl, because purling Fair Isle is way harder than knitting Fair Isle. That's advantage number one. Advantage number two is the pattern's always facing you. So as you're knitting along, you can tell that you're doing the pattern right, or you've got the pattern underneath to remind you that you're doing it right and keep on track. So that's two really important things that make it a lot more helpful. Getting back to why a cardigan or a jacket is better to start with if you're a beginner, is a lot of people think, oh, Fair Isle, it's so many ends I've got to weave in. You don't have to with a cardigan. I've got all this information in my head and I'm trying to think, what do I put out first? So first of all, I'm going to go back and say a true Fair Isle or typical traditional Fair Isle, you only ever have two colours in one row. So even something that is ornate and colourful as this, in one row you've only ever got two colours. You might change the two colours every couple of rows, but in one row of knitting, you only ever have two colours. So you knit in the round. For a jacket, you would have a steek coming down on all of the typical openings. So you'd have a steek coming here, you'd have a steek in the underarms, and you could also have a steek in the neck. So when you're knitting, you start here with your new colours, and you've got two colours, and you have the ends, and then you knit around in a circle for however many rows you need. You have to tell me if you understand this. If you
What,
don't,
you're going to test me on it at the end?
No. But if you think this sounds too complicated,
I might put a steek in your socks.
let me know, because I don't want the viewers to think it's too complicated. So you knit a few rounds, however many you need in those two particular colours, and then you change your wool in the middle of the steek. So you're never going to be that, you'll have the end and the beginning of your yarn here, and you'll never have to weave that in. So you just keep going around, and then, so you've got your steek coming up here, which is typically 10 stitches, and then you'll just cut up the middle, and you won't have to weave those ends in. So don't worry about weaving in ends.
On your cardi.
On your cardigan or jacket. Since I did this one, I learned a technique where I weave in the ends as I go. So it's also not a big deal, and I'll show that in some later videos. So when I did my Henry VIII, I wove in my new threads and wove out my old threads as I went. And it took hardly any extra time at all, and I certainly didn't have a whole lot to weave in at the end of the garment, which puts a lot of knitters off knitting Fair Isle.
And sorry, that's on your jumper, but you still did that in the round?
The jumper, yes.
Jumper, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you're still just knitting the whole way, no
Fair Isle
purling.
purling. Okay, so with this, just having said that, with this design here, Alice has done two different ways of knitting the sleeve cap. Okay, so you knit in the round to the underarm, and then you could steek it, or you can just knit back and forth, so you'd be knitting and then purling back, knitting and purling back, but you've only got this section here to do that in. The reason why you might want to just do a knit purl section is to stop the bulk in the seams. But you know what? I didn't. I steeked it, and there is no bulk. There really is no bulk. I'm going to put pictures over Andrew of this jumper inside out, and you will see the folded back steek of the body and the folded back steek of the sleeve joined together, and I don't feel the bulk at all. So that's that little bit of news. What else did I want to say?
We've got the video.
Yes, but I'll put in the video after I've said the information, so they can think about the information when they're watching the video.
Okay.
So the next thing to do is, if you are going to do steeking, is to make sure you choose your wool wisely. So you want to choose a really good steeking wool, and a good steeking wool is grippy or sticky. So it actually has tiny little hooks in it, so that the wool holds onto each other and doesn't sort of unravel easily. So a woolen spun Shetland is an excellent example, and of course Alice Starmore Hebridean 2-ply and 3-ply are absolutely perfect. And I personally would say, if you're going to knit one of her jumpers, do it in her yarns. You can't get better yarns for her jumpers for a number of reasons. They're perfect Fair Isle yarn. It's absolutely brilliant for Fair Isle, for steeking. And every colour is so beautiful and heathered, and they just mix and match so deliciously. I can't think of another word. That I really don't think you can do better in her designs, because she really is a master of colour. I think she was a painter, and you can tell that she understands colours beautifully.
Have you always stuck with the colours that she's recommended?
I have in these, definitely, definitely, because I couldn't imagine it being any better.
Yep.
And the only reason why I would change something is if I thought I could do it better. And until now, there is no way I could think I can't do it better. I certainly couldn't do her Henry VIII or this any better. It's really beautiful. I am going to change. No, I'm not going to change yours. I am going to knit one for Andrew, which I'll talk about in another episode. But I was deliberating. I was thinking, am I going to do this one or that one or this one or that one? And I wanted to stay away from the warm yellow and orangey colours from Andrew, because that doesn't really suit him. So on one of the designs, I was going to just change that slightly so that the overall effect would suit Andrew better, but I wouldn't do it for any other reason. Okay, back to steeking wool. What else did I want to say? Okay, so you need to avoid smooth, shiny yarns like Superwash treated or worsted spun, or yarn with long, smooth fibres like alpaca. Okay, if you do use those shiny yarns, then you will have to reinforce your steek along the sides before you cut it. But basically, so you're going to be cutting vertically. So you've got columns of knit stitches and you'll be cutting up vertically. And knitting doesn't like to unravel vertically. It really loves to unravel horizontally. So if you use good wool, just cut away. In fact, I've cut my steeks and then continued knitting without doing anything, and nothing has ever unravelled. So a steek typically is 10 stitches wide. 10 stitches wide. So stitch 1 and stitch 10 are edge stitches, and you can use those edge stitches to pick up stitches and later on knit a band from. And then all the stitches in between are the steeking ones, and you will cut between stitch 4 and 5, so straight up the middle, and then you will cut back so that the steek edge is only 2 stitches wide, and then you fold that back behind and then sew it by hand flat. And because you're wanting to reduce as much bulk as possible, either use a finer yarn or split the plies in the yarn. So if you've got a 2-ply, to split it and use only one of the plies to sew it up. Okay, so that's just general information. Anything else? No, I think I've said it all. So we're now going to show you a little steeking video, which I took without any idea of having a podcast. I took it from my phone.
We did that here though, wasn't it?
We did it here on the kitchen table behind us with my phone. And so the quality is not the best, but it's still fun to see. So, happy viewing. Okay, so this is my very first steek and my very first cut. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, cutting in 4 stitches in between the 4th and 5th row, all the way up the top. It's kind of confusing because it looks like I'm cutting in the middle of a stitch, which I think I am. 1, 2, 3, 4, so I have to change it a bit. But in the end it doesn't matter because I have to cut it down to even further. But this is so that I can knit in the round, Fair Isle, without having to purl. Oops, that's a bit of a loose stitch there. So this is it's going to be like a jacket. and I'll pick up stitches along this line here and knit a band like this. So it'll have this band coming up here. And then later on I'll cut even further and turn that around. So that'll be turned around like that. So this is called steeking, and steeking is, or a steek is a Scottish word, I think, for fastening, which is kind of weird. But so it's my very first feral project and my very first steek and my very first cut. But actually it's not that dramatic because this is sticky wool and it doesn't unravel. It's proper feral Shetland wool. And yay, all the way through. Yoo-hoo, I can now get into my cardigan. Except for the arms are still steeked. There's a steek there, so I can't put that on. And that's the inside, all nice and neat. I hope you enjoyed my little steeking adventure, and I hope it encourages you to have a go, because it's actually not so scary. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you say that so easily. But
it is.
There are two things. There are two amazing things that I can think of in your knitting history. One was that, which I remember, and it was actually my idea to video that at the time. That was years ago before.
I'm like, no, let's not worry about it. And
yeah, no, I thought it was, because I just thought it was so amazing to take these scissors to this work, which, I mean, just getting that material there is not easy, and then you hoe in with a pair of scissors with war. And the other one, which is actually up on your Instagram account, is that picture of where you went back and you fixed up a mistake which was way down, which I think was another Mary's out of Starmore.
Yeah, that was
cable.
Madeline's jumper, the Nakraga.
Nakraga, yeah.
I'd done one of the twists in the wrong direction. And so I thought, I'm not going to pull it out, but I'll just unravel.
Yeah, and there's like this open heart surgery done. Have a look. Fruity Knitting on Instagram. That's also a spectacular photo.
And it was your idea too. I know. I'm like, let me just get on it and do it. And you're like, no, let's take a photo.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because we weren't thinking podcasts when we were doing this at all.
We didn't know about podcasts.
We didn't even know about knitting podcasts.
No.
So I'm glad you recorded our history. Yeah, a little bit of history to put in the archives. Okay, so so I hope that really encourages you to steek and feral. It's really not hard. The thing is with feral, and I think this with anything, is that you just have to find out some of the techniques that help you eliminate the struggle, and then your life is so much easier. So I figured out how to knit with, I knit continental with my left hand and English with my right hand, so I can do it together. I never have to drop the wools. That cuts the time down in half already. Then I figured out how to weave the ends in. That cuts out all of that nightmare. And so, so it's really not so difficult. And the thing is that this is how people would do, what people were doing in the Fair Island and in the Shetland Islands. This is how they were knitting all the time. And the other thing I wanted to say about that is some people have very kindly been supporting Andrew and saying he's a hero for doing the magic loop 2 at a time, first time doing his socks. And I just think it's because he doesn't know how to do it any other way. You know what I mean? You just start it and then you don't know if it's hard or it's not hard.
But you hear that. I've actually heard that a lot because I've listened to, there are some audio podcasts and I can't actually name them. I just sort of go around randomly. But in listening to some interviews, there are quite a few people who say, I just did this and I didn't know it was hard. This was just all I knew how to do, or, you know, how I figured out how to do it. And it turns out they're doing something which is generally taken to be really complicated. And, you know, I'm sure there are struggles. I don't know how I would go. We'll get to my knitting later. But.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just say a couple more things on this theme of feral and steeking, and that was to answer a few questions because I got a lot of questions from viewers asking me how I changed my, here it is here, my Henry VIII from being a drop shoulder into a set-in sleeve. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. First of all, I'm going to tell you, I kind of cheated. I had just done my, or not just done, but I had done my Mary Tudor, which had set-in sleeves, and I just basically took the calculations of that set-in sleeve and transferred it into the Henry VIII. So that's what I did to make that as a set-in sleeve. And because they both fit me, the pattern, I might have had different amount of stitches on, but then I just rounded them out or under, I can't remember what. But basically the decreasing was the same. But that doesn't really help you if you haven't done this garment first. But if you do get her book, there are a lot of patterns in her book, and you could just take the calculations of the Mary Tudor and then transfer it to another design that you prefer. But if you haven't got her book, here are a couple of good books for you to put in your library. This one is Knitwear Design Workshop by Shirley Paden, and she goes into a lot of detail about what exactly is a set-in sleeve and how to calculate it. And then this book is The Knowledgeable Knitter by Margaret Radcliffe.
Yep. And I can say something about this. Andrea got this book for her birthday.
Thank you, darling.
We've had some important birthdays in the last couple of weeks since our last episode. We'll mention very quickly. Andrea had her birthday. Our dog Jack had his birthday, I think.
Yes.
And our Queen had her birthday as well.
Did she?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. 90.
That's right,
our Queen.
90.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But this book
Well done.
I bought for Andrea, and that was on the recommendation. If you've made it this far in this very intense episode of our knitting podcast, then
I hope you have, because we've got some fun stuff. So if this is too heavy for you, hang around. Fun stuff is coming.
Yeah, but we got this recommendation from Eva of
The Charm of It.
Who
is a great knitter.
Another podcast, yeah. We stumbled across her very quickly. You can recognise that she's a very, very clever knitter.
Intense knitter.
She's intense, yeah.
Which I love about her, because...
Absolutely. I mean, charming is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
She is completely charming.
She's a real character.
Yeah. So, and if you're, if you want to try, or if you're interested in more adventurous stuff and something,
Or
a little
just
bit
technical
more
details. She talks a lot about her projects, and she's just finished knitting quite a complex cable jumper, which she is really beautiful, really feminine and fitted, and
which I think she largely
designed.
made up,
Yeah.
And I do also know she's just got a big haul of
Alice Starmore
yarns, and is working towards all her Fair Isle projects herself. So
yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so The Knowledgeable Knitter is also really good. It'll tell you about all different kinds of sleeve shapes and what you can do with them. But I have done my own little diagram, and I'm going to give you a mini lesson. You have to excuse my rudimentary drawing. But just so that you understand a set-in sleeve, and this is... Yeah, if you hold it for me, that would be wonderful, but don't cover it up. That's great. So this is just the shape of a body, of a set-in... So that's the body, and that's a set-in sleeve. The measurements which are interesting is your chest measurement. So mine across here, which is from there to there, is 46 centimetres. And then you take your shoulder measurement from here to here, or from there to there, and mine is 40 centimetres. Then you take the difference of that, and that's going to be 6 centimetres, and you divide that in half, which is 3 centimetres.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good with my maths.
Romping it in there.
I'm romping it in. The next thing you need to know, so the 3 centimetres is what you end up with. And that is basically the width of your armhole. Basically. Now this is very general, so don't just think this is the law and go by it, but it's just an understanding. So the next thing you need to know is what is your gauge for 3 centimetres. So how many stitches do you have in 3 centimetres? So just say we take 10, because that's a nice even number. The half of those stitches, so we take 5, you're going to cast off in one row to make a straight edge. So you may not see that, but that's a 5. So you cast off 5 stitches straight. The next 5 stitches you're going to cast off in a tapered fashion, so every other row or every second row. And a good example is you cast off 2, then you knit back, you cast off 2, knit back, cast off 1. So you get this nice tapered section. So you've got 3 sections in your underarm. You have the straight arm of 5 stitches cast off, you have the tapered section of 5 stitches cast off, and then you're going to knit straight up to the shoulder. Now, on your arm piece, this section here has to match this. So you have to cast off 5 stitches. And then you have to do so that the straight section is going to match. Then you have to make them the tapered section matching. So again, you've cast off 2, knit back, cast off 2, knit back. Every other row you're casting off 1. You can change this. You could do it 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 if you wanted, or 2, 1, 1, 1. 1, 1, 1, that's 5, yep. Okay, that doesn't matter, but this tapered section curve has to match this curve. The next thing is, so you've got section 1 is straight, section 2 is curved, then you've got the straight knitting, the measurement from at the end of the tapered right up to the shoulder. That measurement there, that has to be the same as the end of this tapered section, curving right around to the middle, the very middle of the sleeve cap. For those of you who don't know, this here is called a cap. This upper section of the sleeve is called a cap. Okay, so from the end of the tapering right up to the middle, that curved line has to be the same length as from the shoulder down to the top of that curve, or it can be a tiny bit longer, but it can't be shorter. Okay, so they're rough measurements that you can play with to make sure that your sleeve cap is going to fit in to your armhole shaping on the body. The next thing you can think about in general is, how do I explain this? So you can see this is the underarm and that's the underarm, and they come at the same spot. So my drawing is not to scale, but you can see that the cap is shorter than this distance, partly because you've got the curve coming around like that. Okay, but there is variation in this, and that depends on how well endowed you are. So if you're flat-chested like me, so just say around 76 centimetres, then the difference between, if you would take a measurement from here to here and from here to here, this is going to be roughly about 5 centimetres shorter. If you are of average endowment, it'll be roughly 7.5 centimetres shorter. If you are beautifully endowed, generously, extremely endowed, then it is going to be more of a difference of 10 centimetres. And that's because this fabric here is taking up width in this direction, so that the chest measurement is also important. So there's some things to play around with and think about when you're doing it. And the other...
Hang on.
Yeah.
Where was that difference? This 5 to 10 centimetres, is the difference between that length there and that height?
Yeah, so the length between the underarm cast off and the shoulder on the body, and the length between the underarm and the top of the cap.
Top of the cap.
Okay, so if you take that from that, the difference is going to grow.
Depending on your bust.
Depending on the chest size. That's exactly right.
Right.
Okay, so that's what you can do. The most important thing on Fair Isle, though, is making sure that the row here that you cast off on in a chart, just say it's row 42, you're going to cast off here on row 42. So if you make your arm shorter or longer, you have to calculate what row to start on. That way, the design on the body is going to keep going across on the arm, and you'll have continuity there, and that's really important. Okay, so there's one last little bit of technical info before we do something fun, and that is people wanted to know how I changed the drop shoulder to a, I don't know whether you want to put this on or just hold it up. Hold it up.
Whatever you like.
Okay. So this is Andrew's, whoopsie.
Whoopsie.
Andrew's St. Bridget, which was knitted. The pattern is for a drop shoulder. Now, a drop shoulder, can you just hold it like one hand there and one hand there? Okay, but more over your side because I want to show the sleeve. Okay, I want to show this bit here. So if you pull it up. Okay, so normally a drop shoulder means that you knit the body straight up, straight up, straight up, straight up here in a box or a square. And then you knit your sleeve tapered and you just join it on here straight up. So the sleeve length is going to be a little bit shorter. A modified drop shoulder, you knit up to the underarm here and then you cast off in a line and then you knit straight up, okay? And here's my drawing of it. So there's a modified drop shoulder. And that means that therefore you have to knit your sleeve an extra length, and however long your cast off stitches. So however wide your cast off stitches are here, you knit that extra and straight. So you'll taper that and then you're going to knit straight because it has to sort of slide in here. Is that a good drawing?
Yeah.
Good. So basically what you want to do is make that closer to the shoulder edge.
What do you make that there?
Yeah, so
Okay.
normally you would knit straight up here, right? And
Yeah.
in the end that hangs off the shoulder and it hangs down here.
Okay, so we're figuring that my shoulder goes here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here you knit up, you cast off, and then you knit up so that the seam is going to be closer to the shoulder. But you want to do that without disturbing any cabled patterns. So if we go back to your jumper, I chose to do it. I wanted to include this lovely plait up. So Andrew's shoulder end actually goes about here. So it still hangs off his shoulder a bit, but it's less than down here if it was going to be a... So it's that much. It's that much more narrow than if it was just going to be a straight drop shoulder. Okay, and that takes out a bit of bulk under here and it just makes it slightly more fitted. So that's a very easy way of modifying a jumper.
And this is where you've come in here.
Yeah, I just come in straight in here. But then what you have to make sure you do is, if you're just doing, hold it up because I'm not sure that they're going to get a straight on view. If you're doing a box, what's my name? What are all the
Drop
names?
shoulder.
A drop shoulder. You're going to knit straight up here, and it doesn't matter how wide your sleeve is, you just sew it on. So it could be down here or it could be up here, it doesn't matter. But if you are going to slide it in, you have to make sure that the width of the sleeve is going to be from here up and down again and no wider, or else you'll get pleats in here. I think they'll understand, even if you don't.
Well, I don't understand, because you've got
Okay.
because you can just...
Okay, you cannot make this wider than here, or else you're going to get gathers.
Yeah, that's clear. But for a box drop shoulder,
Yeah.
you would just... Your top is set and you just go down as far as you need to.
Yeah, it
Okay,
doesn't matter.
Understand.
So that's the basic thing that you can start off doing to take out. And of course, because a lot of people say that they love Alice Starmore's patterns, they think they're beautiful, but they're slightly 80s looking, some of them, not her ones from the latest Tudor Roses, but some of the others, because they are very much based on this drop-shouldered look. So these are some easy ways you can modify that. And everyone was wearing oversized jumpers in the 80s, so just go down a size. Make sure that it fits you neatly around the torso area, and then make it a modified shoulder, and it'll look great.
Yep.
End of technical details
Whoa.
section. That was full on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. We have got, do you want to introduce our
What are we up
next?
to now?
Extreme knitting.
Extreme knitting, yes. Okay, we have an segment. I always get them mixed up. We have a segment called Extreme Knitting. It's not if you haven't seen our first episode, we were in northern Wales and it was pretty crazy. But we went to the top of Mount Snowdon, which is the highest mountain in Wales and
England.
Yes,
Not
I don't really understand.
Scotland.
No, Scotland is higher, but it's really high. It was snowing and Andrea knitted.
On the summit.
On the summit, in the snow. I couldn't possibly have done that. I managed to get the camera turned on, but...
And then your hands froze.
Yeah, that was it. There was nothing more intelligent coming out of my fingers. So, extreme knitting, we go to different places around and we encourage other people to show us where you're knitting.
Yeah, and we've got a thread on Ravelry, and people are starting to reply. So we've got some good photos in there. We've got a photo from another podcaster, Fibertrack, who she sounds like she has some wonderful extreme knitting experiences. Her husband, I think, is a ranger.
He's a ranger in the park there. I can't remember the name.
In Maine, somewhere northern Maine.
One of these stunning areas of the world. Anyway, if you've got pictures of yourself out in the wild anywhere, put them up on our thread. We'd love to see them. Our little excursion today that you'll see is to a place which we have been visiting for a very long time, because it was where we started having our farm holidays here when our daughter was really young.
We went twice a year.
Yeah, and we loved it. We just found this really wonderful family to go and stay with, and Madeline would go off and play with the cows all day. In the hay. She would come back in the evening with long hair, completely smelling of cows, and with hay right through her hair, and we would have to drag her half asleep into the shower and try and clean her up, and then the next day she'd do it again.
She'd be right out there. She'd wake up at 6 o'clock and be out there with the farmer's wife.
Yeah. So this is in what's called the Oldenwald, which is not you've got the Black Forest in Germany, which is a bit further down south. Oldenwald is another forest. It's a very big area, and we're visiting an old castle. It's fairly run down. Yep, visiting an old castle. And it's pretty run down, but we went out there. We did some knitting. Have a bit of a look at Germany's forests and castles.
Castles. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep.
Take photos of yourself wherever you are, out in the sun, out in the woods, on a subway. Hashtag it, extreme knitting, Instagram it
Yep.
if you're on Instagram, or come over to Ravelry, put a picture there, and because it's fun for people to get out and knit and to see people for people to see where you are.
Yeah. On Instagram, put the @ fruity knitting. Andrea's fruity knitting everywhere.
Tag me, and then so I can look at.
Okay, our next episode is under construction.
And we can start with you.
I'm going to go first because I've got, as people may have seen, I've got my socks. So this is my third project, but I'm calling it project number 2 because the first project was project number 0, and nobody's seen it yet. It's still secret. But so my project number 2 is these socks. And officially the pattern is Hermione's everyday socks, but really we can't blame
Hermione.
Erika, we can't blame Hermione, we can't blame the designer Erika Lueder.
Yeah.
Because we just sort of changed everything. So
we didn't.
Well, we changed.
No, it's sorry.
Sorry.
It's Hermione's everyday. It's your segment.
My turn.
It's
You've
his turn.
talked heaps.
I'll tell you what to say. It's
Yeah, I know that.
Well, say it.
All right, yep. Sorry. We didn't put the pattern in from Hermione's socks, so Hermione's socks are better than this. And we did a change on the heel. We replaced it with Susan B. Anderson's simple sock heel, something like that. We'll put a link in the program notes. Our program notes are quite good. Have a look. The program notes are on.
Andrew does them all. He's a whiz.
Program notes are on Ravelry or on YouTube or on our fruityknitting.com website. So have a look for links. So we did this. I'll try to show it without letting things fall off the needles.
Even side on. He's done a brilliant job.
Yeah, they're upside down, dolls.
Yeah, I was just showing how they stick out.
Look at this heel. So the heel, essentially, right? I know there are lots of different sorts of sock heels, but this heel, right, comes up with this little shape here.
Gusset, yeah.
All right, heel, gusset, whatever. It did short rows. Okay, I when I saw the pattern, I couldn't really imagine how this was going to work, and I still can't really understand how it worked, but it did. We did short rows. I did backwards and forwards. And then, I'd already knitted a section separate from that.
Yeah, a heel flap first.
Yeah, so heel flap and then short rows and then picked up stitches and...
Decreased.
That was about... Then decreasing. I'll try to show that a little bit. It's hard to get around to taking photos of everything, but there's this decreasing here and it all comes in a little triangle here. All right, it looks pretty good. Andrea, these socks are for Andrea. That's how they go. So Andrea's foot's going to go in here and come out here.
Yes.
I need to keep...
I'm really looking forward to them. And he's actually got a really, really good... maybe we can go close up. He's got a lovely, neat gauge.
Yeah.
Lovely, neat knitting.
Which I consider a miracle. To be serious about that, I think... The only way I can explain that that's a decent gauge is the way I hold the wool, which is how you showed me and how you don't do it anymore, which is
I
really
do
funny.
all different kinds of things.
Yeah.
I try different things.
But sort of twisting the wool around my little finger. Andrea actually has some technique videos and you can see how she recommends doing that, and it certainly seems to work. There was a bit of a drama, a DPN drama yesterday, because I was on DPNs to do all this round the corner heel bit. And I was a bit casual with it, and I was knitting around, and I thought I was doing really well, and it's relatively easy. You're doing this sort of decrease, it's a little pattern, 32 stitches here, and then decreasing on the 2 cornery bits. I thought it was all going well, but I thought I was getting ladders, all right? So I was really careful and pulling it extra tight to stop this laddering from happening, which can happen when you've got your...
Magic loop.
Yeah, magic loop, but I was using DPNs. Maybe
Yeah.
I shouldn't have worried about it. But I think even with DPNs, you have to be careful about getting a ladder, okay? So I was pulling it tight, which is what I do to try and stop getting a ladder. And it was only last night that I showed this to Andrea, and Andrea said, "Oh, you've dropped a stitch." And then she said, "Oh, you've dropped 2 stitches." So
And one was halfway down.
yeah,
One
and
was
she did
about
some
here.
of this emergency surgery and managed to make it all good again. If it was left to me, I would have had to just ditch those 4 to 8 rows and do it all again if I could figure out how to do that at all. Yeah, so I was just not making sure that the stitches didn't fall off the end of the DPNs. Yeah. Apart from that, as you can see, it's 2 at a time, magic loop. We're back on the magic loop needles here. It was an interesting experience doing this heel, and I'll say this quickly. As I said, I didn't see how it was going to work, and I didn't see how I was going to manage it, but I sort of just ploughed through, and it did work, and I may do another pair of socks straight after these. Andrea really wants me to make socks, and there's kind of a deal that for every drop-dead stunning jumper I get, I have to do 2 socks.
2 drop-dead stunning
Yeah,
socks.
well, 2 socks. So maybe I will do it, and it wouldn't be bad to get a little bit more practice before going on to something else. But it was interesting to see that, you know, actually it works, and it all came together. I would say none of it was really all that hard, but the one bit that I was most uncertain about is picking up the stitches, because again, we didn't quite follow the instructions exactly, and you've got to sort of use a bit of judgment as to where you grab a stitch and getting them nicely spread out. And I think that worked okay. There's probably something that you would get better with practice. I didn't do anything too systematically. I could see that you could break it in half and, you know, put a little marker in there or whatever, but that was a bit too much. So there they are. I'm pretty impressed. At the moment, I'm round the corner of the heel, and I'm now doing the foot, and then I've got to do the toe, and then they'll be done. So I'm aiming to have, I don't know if I've said this before, but I'm aiming to have them finished by next episode. These are Andrea's birthday socks, so they're a little bit late already.
Last time I talked about yak fibre and my latest cardigan design by Marie Varlin, or Wallen, as you told me.
We don't know.
Anyway, and I had done a sleeve, and I'd taken the chart with me, and I didn't understand what something meant, so I Googled it, and I followed the Google instructions, and it wasn't quite how
It was meant to
Marie
be.
Wallen had written it, so I had to undo the whole thing.
Can we just throw in the undoing now?
Okay, so Andrew had some fun.
Yeah, bit of
Again.
video fun. Yep. So watch this, and we'll be back in less than a minute. And then we're back again.
So that was a bit of fun, a little bit of magic
Yeah,
fun.
if you're gonna pull something apart, you may as well get something good out of it.
And yeah, so Madeline and Andrew got together and did some good stuff. So I've redone both of my sleeves because I had to.
Redo both of your sleeves.
No, only one. Yeah. So there are my sleeves, and this cardigan, I'm just going to be short on this because I spent so much time on from the archives. So this cardigan is a summer cardigan. It's just got 3/4 sleeves. I haven't got the picture in front of me right now, but it's called Norbu. Is it called Norbu? Yep. Yeah, it's Norbu by Marie Wallen, and you can see it in Ravelry. And it has really lovely yoke section with cables coming up. It's a really cute design. So you first of all knit the sleeves in the round, which I've done, up to the armhole length. Then you get the body part, and it's a cardigan. So you knit that around and back, So knit, purl, a lot of stocking stitch. And it's not quite ready for it yet, but this is how it's going to go. And when I knit an extra section and I'm up to here, then I will incorporate the top part of the sleeve, both sleeves, and continue to knit around. And then I will kitchen a small section of stitches here and the corresponding amount here together. So there'll be no seams in this. And then I will knit a band across here. So I suppose I'll get that finished by next episode.
Not that we're competing or anything.
Between the two of us. Okay, so that's mine. So I fixed up the cable pattern. I don't know if I said that clearly before you watched that video, but I did the cable pattern slightly wrong, and then I looked at the picture in the pattern and thought, God, that looks way better than mine. And Andrew said I wasn't allowed to fudge it. I had to undo it all and do it again properly. So I did. So I think we're finished.
Hurly-burly.
Yeah.
That was an intense episode.
It was.
So we have to do we've got a few little finishing things. I have to bring something up.
Go ahead.
We get lots of comments, and I don't know if you saw this comment, but somebody was saying that the connection between Australian magpies and knitters was tenuous.
Tenuous. Yes.
Now I didn't descend into
defensive,
highly emotional, defensive argument with this, but I would say this was in episode 3. If you haven't seen episode 3, then definitely go back.
Particularly if you like magpies.
Yeah.
Or if you don't know how Australian magpies are extra special.
Yeah. Have a look at the magpies and let us know what you think. You can write your comments, and maybe you want to descend into a emotional discussion on whether magpies are relevant to a knitting podcast. In that episode, just since we're talking about episode 3, we do also have an interview with
Erika
Janssen,
who is my the owner of my local yarn store, and that's an interesting interview. We talk about Danish designers, which are her thing, her love.
Yep. And her history.
And her history,
which is interesting around the world. And apart from that, normal things. Subscribe. We've got, Andrea's got tutorials, which she mentioned. The mist hat tutorial will be coming out probably next Friday, I guess. We have little technique videos if you're a beginner like me.
Just a very quick word. My tutorials, because I've just been teaching Andrew to knit and Madeline to knit, I've been well aware of what Andrew calls the curse of knowledge, which means that when you've been doing something for such a long time, you forget what you know, and what is really obvious to you is not obvious to somebody else. So in my tutorials, I've tried to make the effort of really explaining everything to a complete beginner or someone who hasn't had experience, and questions that I mightn't even think are relevant are quite relevant to a beginner. So I've thought of Andrew and Madeline in my mind when I've been making these tutorials. So there might be some things in there for intermediate knitters that you might learn some things or pick up another view of something. But it's definitely to encourage total beginners, only people who knit and purl and cast on, to get out and start doing more expensive garments and
garment
projects.
Knitting. Another thing to mention there is we have got little links in the program notes, or in the underneath in YouTube in the description. You can click on any of the links and jump to a particular spot, which is really handy because you're not going to sit down and do a whole coat in one sitting. So you can get back to where you need to be really easily. I also think it's good, even if you're not doing that particular garment, you can jump to something and find out about stitching in a sleeve or whatever. So that's there, and I think it's fairly transferable. I do also want to make another quick plug for our program notes. They're not the complete best program notes in the world, but we do try to make them nice. We keep links to everything. I certainly think all the designers and everything, they all need their credit, so we try to give them links so that they get their, so that you can find it and they get their recognition. And we include that on Ravelry, YouTube, and on our website, fruityknitting.com. fruityknitting.com is probably the nicest, although I'm not always really good at maintaining that.
Well, you're pretty busy. I mean, we
Yeah.
both work, but Andrew
Yep.
works really hard, and then he's doing this on top. So
Yeah, but check out the notes. Just make sure you know that they're there, because they're a nice little addition. I think that's
thank
it.
you very much for watching. A big, big thank you for new and old viewers. Thank you for spending your time with us. I hope it's been fun for you. It's been fun for us. And yeah, thanks for the privilege of letting us into your living room or space.
And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Yes.